Rock and roll. Kia ora, everybody. What's up? It is Robett. I've finally done it. I've got a politician on the show. By design, never done it, and I finally had a point. The budget came out yesterday. Everyone's going nuts. I got randomly hit up yesterday from someone in the mix, and now we're here with the leader of the top party, Geoff Simmons. How are you, mate?
Kia ora, Robett. Awesome, thanks, mate. Great, glad to pop your cherry. Thanks for having me.
Uh, that's one way to bloody start it. So, and before I will give context. I was just quickly saying before. So my whānau's from Ngāti Porou, East Coast Gisborne, so I grew up within, I guess, Māori base and culture, so people would think would be with Māori Party. Then I grew up in Aranui, Christchurch. We were on the sickness benefit, so people would then think I was Labour. Then I got into professional snowboard world, and then people would think I was green and environment. Then I got into business, and people would think I'd be national. But I've yet to tell anyone where exactly I sit. But what I will say is I am friends with a lot of people on all sides, so if we're going to do it, I'm happy to play in the middle, and let's flip and giddy up and go. Mr. Geoff. Budget came out yesterday. Is it shit or is it awesome?
Oh, it's not. It's neither. It's somewhere in between. I mean, I think what they've done is they have stopped the bleeding, if you like. They're making sure that the patient is on ice and is making it through, but there really isn't any sense of how the patient is going to get better and even get better than they were before. If COVID-19 was the illness, the lockdown was the illness, how are we going to get back stronger than we were before? So it's kind of stemming the bleeding, but nothing hugely visionary.
Because I put a message up on my socials yesterday, and I was like, hey, I'm a bit of a rookie to this political shit. Who's the winners and losers? And don't give me any emotional rants, because my message changes go flipping. People get so just like, I get it, the emotion, but just give me non-emotive data so I can just look at it. And you got tagged in it, and then you said winners in order: hospitals, not GPs, just hospitals, people in the state house waiting list, apprentices in trade training, defence, rail, early childhood education, tourism industry, racing industry. The losers, pretty much everyone else. No helicopter money or benefit increase. Government had kept 20 billion back in a slush fund though, so it could be more coming. So I think when I was looking at it, everyone was kind of getting pretty hyped on the events and the tourism piece. I guess is the reason why they haven't gone as heavy in that is just because they know there's not going to be a lot of international movement for the last while. Like a lot of people are talking about small business have got nothing, and tourism and events have got nothing. So stuff you, right? I'm just reading through a whole bunch of it. This whole SME thing seems like it's a bit of an issue. Where do you sit with the whole tourism, events, and SME side? Because obviously a lot of the feedback that everyone was getting pretty hyped on was in that space. What's the go there?
Yeah, well, I think SME stuff was really disappointing. When the racing industry gets more than SMEs, it's a pretty sad day for the country.
Yeah, so just jump in there, because a bunch of people were getting venti about that. So what's the deal? Because it was something about the ratio of the amount that it brings into the amount that they actually got. So is that just to try and get gaming back going again, or what was kind of the thinking behind that? Because a lot of people were pretty fired.
Yeah, it's been poorly managed, to be honest, and so they have had to give racing some money just to keep it going. And don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against racing, I've got nothing against betting, but that industry has plenty of assets that they could use, and that's what most industries do in bad times. They sell off the assets that they don't need. Racing hasn't had to do that. They've got bailed out. So I understand they're going through hard times, but so is everyone. So what that piece is really about is it's Winston looking after his mates. Frankly, that's what it comes down to.
So I love this shit. It's always because always get back channeled from all these different lanes of like, oh, what's the stuff? So the play on that is, when he's looking after his mates, right, he's got boys in that side, and then that's it. But then it pops up, then all of a sudden they get more money, and then all of a sudden it looks a bit not fair to the SMEs. Because one of the crew that I was looking on here was basically goes, 500,000 small businesses, 97% of all businesses. Yeah, they got jack. And it's kind of like, holy shit, that's pretty gnarly, man. That doesn't seem that cool.
Yeah, and that is the big disappointment here. Like I said, how are we going to rebound from this stronger? How are we going to work smarter as a country? And SMEs are a massive part of that. So absolutely agree with you there.
When you look at the political landscape right now, so what date is the election? Is that come out yet?
September 19th.
September 9th. Okay. So that goes to voting for gold. And you were just saying before, the structure of how the top party setup is now, I guess, owned by the members. In a nutshell, for those who don't know, how does that work differently to other parties? What's the 101 of what that looks like in the real world?
Well, most parties rely on donations from big money, and that's the National Party to a large extent, the Labour Party, certainly New Zealand First. That's what all of the scandal is about at the moment, with New Zealand First getting taken to basically getting taken to court over sort of being secretive about their donors. What we do know is that some of their donors were in the racing industry, so that kind of plays back into that conversation before. So TOP really is a member-led movement. The average donation, so we don't get any public funding because we're not in Parliament. All of those parties that you hear about in Parliament get money from the public purse to pay for their staff and stuff. But we survive entirely on donations. The average donation to the top party is about $25. So it just gives you an idea of the kind of grassroots movement that we are.
How does it? So let's go there for a second. So to get in this next phase, how do you fund a campaign? How do you fund an entire business without being funded? Is it just donations? Like, what's the business model of a party?
Yeah, it's donations, and this is one of the big problems in New Zealand politics, is that political parties have stopped being funded by their members. Their membership has been dropping over the past 20 years, 30 years, and increasingly political parties have gone to big business for funding instead. So the business model really has shifted, and what we're trying to bring back is that kind of old school model of membership, everyone chipping in a little bit, and people chipping in time too. I mean, we couldn't run without our network of volunteers. We have an amazing group of volunteers who do most of the work that normally you'd have to pay for.
Got it. So when you look at the political landscape right now, doing a bit of digging up since I came through, you came from you're an economist, is that right? So you're basically a financial brain, so I understand that sort of side of things. When you look at the COVID's decimated a bunch of industries. Everyone started at zero. It's restarting back up like the world's never seen before. It's trying to go from zero back up. New Zealand obviously now has, I guess, I would rather New Zealand be bitching about money than bitching about mass deaths, right? Like net. That's where I kind of sit. But then then within New Zealand now, from a commercial standpoint, in terms of the economy, what's the biggest challenge right now you see for the New Zealand economy today?
Well, I think you've nailed it. It really is around that tourism piece. That's going to be the part of the economy that is decimated most. We're assuming here that we don't go into another lockdown. If we go into another lockdown, then there will be real carnage. But because the government's handled the crisis all in all pretty well. We weren't as prepared as we should have been, but given how prepared we were, the government responded quickly, and internationally we're now in a pretty good position. So the big issue that we face really is around that tourism and hospo piece, as you were talking about. That's the sector of the economy that is going to get decimated, that has been decimated and will continue to face challenges. The good news is that actually domestic tourism makes up 60% of the sector. And if everyone in New Zealand spent as much money on tourism in the country as they normally spend overseas, then tourism would be okay. So it really is about giving people the confidence to get out there and spend money to enjoy their own country. I don't know if you remember that ad campaign from the 80s. You're probably too young to remember that. But there was this.
Yeah. I heard about it. I've
Yeah.
heard about it.
Don't leave town till you've seen the country, and
Yeah.
pretty crack up Kiwi ads. Just search for it on YouTube. They're pretty hilarious. So that's really the challenge that we've got over the next wee while, and that's why we were calling for some sort of universal basic income, some sort of payment to everyone, even a temporary emergency payment to everyone of $1,000 or $1,500, like they've done in Australia and Hong Kong, places like that. Give everyone some money. The people that really need it to pay their rent, to put food on the table, to put shoes on their kids' feet, they'll spend it on that. That's cool. Anyone who doesn't need it, say, hey, go to Queenstown, go to the East Coast. I'm actually planning a trip to the East Coast to your Turanga Waiwai. And, and that's what we've all got to do. We've got to get out there and enjoy our own country.
Universal basic income, you jumped on there. Has anyone rolled this out at scale yet and been a success? And is the reason why it hasn't popped has been what?
It has been rolled out in scale in developing countries. So we have seen it, done wholesale in developing countries.
How'd it work? How'd it go?
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, the results are immense. It gives people that basic level of security to know that they can train, to know that they can start a business, to know that they can, take some risks, basically. It also honors that unpaid labor upon which our economy is built, that foundation of our economy and society, all of those carers, all of those people staying at home, raising kids, that sort of stuff, all the people who are volunteering. So it has been trialled at scale in those developing countries. It vastly improves mental health. People are more likely to work and start businesses and all that sort of stuff. And the people that aren't, that are less likely to work or start businesses, they're usually either looking after kids or they're retraining themselves. And as we develop into as we get into this gig economy, which you'll know all about, increased automation, all of that sort of stuff, people are moving in and out of jobs, in and out of careers really rapidly. I think this universal basic income will be the welfare system of the future.
Oh, big calls. Because I know, when I was younger, we were on the benefit for sickness benefit and stuff for a bit, and the classic would always be, these dole bludgers, blah blah. I'm imagining the have you got someone saying what's up there? I can talk shit for a second if you want. Go,
I do have someone at the door.
Go kick him out. Say, yo,
Randy.
Yeah, no, you're right. Do your thing. I'll go rant for a bit. All right. Universal basic income. Pretty intrigued about that. I have not seen it. The actual uptake on it when people really talk about it. What I was gonna say. Oh, there he is. He's already back. Oh, that was quick. What was that?
Someone wanting to turn the water off for 10 minutes. Fine. I don't need water. I've got a drink.
Yeah, done. No, I was going to say, because people would say, it's around dole bludging. The other people that would potentially look at it, would they be saying the reason not to is like, well, why would you incentivize and actually pay people to do nothing? Stuff that, get off your ass, go get it, go do your own thing, go create your own thing, go earn it for yourself. Doesn't seem in New Zealand politics, no one's really pushed this before. It actually really brought it up sort of really, really loudly. Where do you think that would sit on the other side if, they've been called dole bludgers before, potentially what the mindset shift? How do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, two things about that. Firstly, the big advantage of a UBI, Universal Basic Income, is because you're giving the money to everyone. People don't lose it when they start working. So as you'll have known from experiences with the benefit system, there's this really difficult period when you're trying to get work on a benefit and then you lose your benefit. And actually some people for a while, depending on how much work you can get, how many hours you can get, you're actually no better off working than you are on the benefit. So that is a really big issue that the UBI removes. And the real winners out of from a UBI are kind of that the people that are on minimum wage. Based on our plan, someone on the minimum wage would be about $6,000 a year better off. So that would take them over the living wage, if you like. So that's the first point. It gets rid of that disincentive to work. The second point is really it's around psychology, because like I said, UBI has been trialed overseas. It's been trialed big scale in developing countries. It's been tried small scale in developed countries. And we know that people are no less likely to work. If anything, they're more likely to work. But people just assume that other people are lazy. When you ask people, what would you do with a UBI? They all say, oh, I would start a creative project, or I'd spend more time with my kids, or I'd start a business, or, they come up with really cool answers. Everyone's got a cool answer for what they would do. But when you ask them what other people do, they think, oh, they'd probably play Xbox and go surfing. So we all think that we would use it well, but other people are lazy. It's a basic lack of trust.
Got it. The headspace shift. Now, has anyone any politicians tried to push for this yet, or would you be kind of the first to really jump in on to try and push UBI?
I mean, the Labour Party and the Green Party have both talked about a UBI, but they haven't come up with an actual plan. They've kind of just floated the idea. And so we are the first to release an actual plan of how it could be done, which we did a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, we're the pioneers there.
It's cool to be first. So you're economists, you understand the money stuff. If you were Jacinda and you wanted to, how would you have done the budget differently with $50 billion to help small businesses, which are 97% of New Zealand businesses? What would you have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, this is a massive area, and I have to confess I'm working on a small business policy at the moment. But one thing that I think is really missing, and the government has done a little bit on this, but there's so much more that could be done. What we could do is set up a digital support ecosystem for small business. So if you imagine, Xero, right? Are you on Xero?
Yeah, or Xero.
Or the other one, the foreign one? So you imagine.
It's called MYOB, but yes.
I know. I didn't want to advertise a foreign one. That's all.
No, I got it. I got homies there too. It's fine. Go for it.
So imagine you're on Xero, and so this thing has all of the information about your business. It knows about your business. Imagine if this was, with your permission, hooked up to government support networks, and it said, oh, look, I noticed you've just hired someone. Did you know about this health and safety stuff? A video pops up, you can learn about health and safety, all that sort of stuff. Help file your tax returns, all that sort of stuff could be automated into the system with your permission to really help you grow your business. The really big issue in New Zealand is management skill, and that's what we need.
What does that mean? Like the ops of the strategy for within businesses itself, not just the ops?
Yeah, a lot of small business owners have a really cool idea. Do you know what I mean? Like they have a cool idea of something to deliver. And that's why so many New Zealand businesses are so innovative, and the ones that do well really, take off and doing really niche things across the world. But the issue that a lot of people have is the actual business skills, how to market, how to do the accounts, how to plan the financials, how to get the money that's needed. And, getting more money into business is one of the major focuses of the Opportunities Party, because as a country, we focus way too much on investing in housing and not enough on investing in business. So that's another big thing that we would focus on.
Yeah, nice. Matt Hegan asks, what does Geoff think about an empty homes tax? So what's that about?
Yeah, so an empty homes tax. The idea is that, of course, we have homelessness, and we have about, say, in Auckland, we know that about 8% of homes are empty.
Really?
Yeah, that's right. So,
Jeez.
I mean, there's one right next door to my parents' place in Westmere, and it's just quite clearly being land banked to be developed. They're just waiting till the right time to stick up some medium density housing. It's waiting until the land price gets juicy enough.
Yeah,
because that's where the real money is, right? So, so an empty homes tax. The totally agree with what you're trying to achieve there. The difficult thing is designing it. It has been trialed in some countries to sort of varying degrees of success. Our tax policy would pretty much act as an empty homes tax, because it would really sting people that are leaving bare land or an empty house. Those would be the ones that would be really stung by our tax policy. So I agree with what you're trying to achieve. The design, the devil's in the detail on that stuff.
It's pretty tricky. I mean, if you're trying to start a flipping party, you've got to think of absolutely everything. And one of the things I've been really kind of blown away with is, say, with COVID, the 360 butterfly effect it's have on every single touch point in every single person's life, everywhere. Every different industry, vertical, personal, professional, flipping everywhere, and then the trickle-on effects of how it's sort of done it. And when it comes to something like so politics, the classic is national with business and labor for the people and community, like commerce versus community, whatever. But with this, exactly for yourself, it must be quite tricky to try and be a leader of a party, to have to pre-plan a 360 approach to every single touch point and every single thing. Because, man, it's how do you do it? How do you think about your thinking for taking a 360 approach for every touch point for every New Zealander? How do you approach your leadership with that?
It's even more difficult than that, because what the Opportunities Party or TOP's trying to achieve is to put forward a platform that's based on what actually works, rather than trying to appeal to a particular ideology. Sometimes we agree with Labor, sometimes we agree with National, because it all depends what actually works on the ground. So yeah, it is difficult, and there are some things you have to say, look, we're just not going to touch. So, for example, we haven't got a foreign policy or a defence policy. So, there's some areas that we've just had to say, look, we haven't got time to put resources into that. But generally, I'd say the hard part is really working out what you stand for. And I think most Kiwis stand for fairness, for equality of opportunity. They believe that we live in a country where everyone who works hard can get ahead. And sadly, that isn't the situation right now. There are a lot of people who have it much harder than others, and that's particularly the case for younger generations, particularly around the cost of housing and some of the massive issues we face with the environment going forward as well. So what we're trying to do is offer is say to people, we stand for equality of opportunity. We stand for a fair go. We know that's what the other politicians say as well. But from our perspective, for younger generations and future generations to actually get a fair go, we need real change. We need fundamental change to actually achieve that. That carving out that niche isn't easy, though. Yeah, I totally agree.
When you look at the political landscape in New Zealand right now, do you think the political playground is fair?
The political playground is fair. I mean, I think,
like, for you're obviously an underdog, right? Like you
yeah.
you're scrapping, you're fine. You've got to like duck and weave your David versus Goliath shit. Like, do you feel that it's fair?
Well, two things I'd say in response to that. Firstly, is the 5% threshold to get into Parliament. I mean, that is basically 150,000 votes. So Top got about half of that in the last election, and that was with a millionaire backing us. So it is a massive challenge to get over that 5% threshold. So I would say that's a big barrier that probably needs to be looked at. And the other area is what I was talking about before, is political finance. The parties in Parliament do get money from the public purse, which is absolutely fair enough. But then there's all this kind of murky, dodgy dealings around donations to political parties, and that really needs to be sorted out so that people know what they're voting for. Because if you voted for New Zealand First at the last election, did you know that you were voting for the racing industry? It's it's not very transparent.
Well, what I've realised, and I'm only 35 now, but there's always what the public sees. There's what's happening behind the scenes. There's the people that are making those plays, and then the people that know what's up. And there's always 4 layers of gnarly shit. And so you're just scrapping down there, and a friend of mine describes it to me. He goes, "Mate, stop squabbling over the fish and chip shit. There's flipping big. And it's just been really interesting watching the level of thinking with how these things move in the levers and stuff. And it's, I mean, full credit to politicians to be able to like navigate that. I mean, I'm a massive fan of chess, but I just kind of, I don't know if I could deal with all of that emotional, strategic, like the way they do it. It just, oh man, it's so gnarly to me. Like it just feels pretty crazy. So obviously my own thing, but I will say when I had a good bro. Do you know Rob Campbell? He's
Yes.
Yeah. So Rob, so he's a G, and I was talking to him about it, and he described it as a playground. And he goes, the biggest disappointing thing about it is it's more like a seesaw instead of a slide. And he was basically saying, 3 years this way, 3 years that way, 3 years. And in terms of progress for people, you'd think it'd go there because all that happens, it's a similar thing to, a new CEO comes in after 8 years and the first thing he's going to do is change everything. He's got to make a statement. So that kind of goes along too. But at the end of the day, it comes down to sort of core key things that you're about, right? So does everyone know where everyone stands on, like abortion, marijuana, euthanasia, death penalty, any of this other stuff? Does everyone know where everyone sits? Is that like a public thing? Like how does that play out? What's the deal there?
Yeah, some of those issues are conscience issues. So in fact, a lot of the ones you just mentioned are conscience issues. So Top favours legalising cannabis because it's worked overseas. You don't have to look far to see. Yeah, it raises taxes and it reduces harm. Depending on how you manage it. But most countries have managed to reduce youth use, which is what everyone's worried about.
What do the gangs go to then, though, after? Because that's always the comeback, right? And that's the same one of, the bros on the East Coast and the flipping to Pookie hardcore boys, they're going to go swap to something else. Is that the danger, or is that kind of like a mythical thing that you think?
Well, if you do it right, which I think this is one area that the government has got right in its proposal, what you do is you encourage people, you encourage the people who used to grow cannabis on the black market, you encourage them into the market economy. You help them develop businesses and use their skills in that way. I mean, the gangs are kind of the in between, aren't they? If you can take the growers out of the equation, at least you can provide them with real legal jobs. I mean,
so you're full weed.
Oh, absolutely. And, from talking to a lot of people in communities, for example, here in Wellington, there's Porirua, a lot of people go to dealers looking for green and they come back with white, and so that's another major
upsell,
reason.
Mate. It's the upsell.
Exactly. And that is something that legalizing marijuana would reduce. So I think, that's got to help combat the gangs.
What about the other one? Now, is it still coming up, the euthanasia stuff? Where do you sit on that?
Oh, well, that's a conscience issue for most people. For me,
what does that mean, conscience issue?
Conscience issue, it means that MPs can vote however they like. There's not usually party lines. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
There's a few issues like that, and yeah, they tend to be the more useful conversations that happen in Parliament. You don't get that kind of, as you say, the
my crew's doing this. It's like, geez.
Yeah, exactly, and like I totally agree with you. That is really what's holding politics back. It's that whole red versus blue, left versus right camp kind of carry on, and that just doesn't exist in Europe. We need to grow up and move past that. But on voluntary euthanasia, it's actually technically voluntary assisted dying, because if you're already dying, you can choose to die faster. I personally support that. I've lost a couple of grandparents to cancer, and they were both pretty gnarly experiences. And I don't know what choice they would have made if they'd had the choice, but it would have been good if they'd had the choice.
Yeah, your body, your rules, your life, and I can definitely understand it. When I went to Singularity University, and they were talking about space politics, as you do at Singularity. And what was really interesting is that the way they framed this session, they said, hey, look, we agree that humanity is going to go to these other planets, great. But when we do, what rules do we take with us? And if we have a blank whiteboard to reframe and reimagine what politics should be, and we've got, hundreds of countries all going to jump in a rocket ship, we're going to go piss off onto this thing, how would you redesign it differently? And it just made your brain think differently, because you don't need to think about right or left or this or that and whatever. If you were to think about, because then where it kind of got to was, well, if this is what we're going to take as an equal thing for humanity across, why would we not test that here and actually do it for ourselves? Why are we still so fragmentedly aligned with the way we do things? It was kind of like one of those mind trip flipping IQ Harvard bastard people. And it was amazing, right? Because it got you to think, well, wait a second, how and why? So if you were to redesign, say politics, say for New Zealand, you can control this with enough power and influence and whatever. How would you redesign politics in New Zealand that you feel would make it fairer that could potentially work for the world?
Look, the big thing for me is devolution, is localism. Is giving more power to communities. A couple of years ago, I went to South America, and I found out there that the Inca Empire was built on communities of 200 people. Every 200 people had a chief, and then every 200 chiefs had another chief of the chief. Do you know what I mean? Like, yep. It was built in layers of 200, and I can really see that. Communities work when you can know everyone, and there is something about that number of 150 to 200 people that you really can know people and work things out. And the reason that we have nations and nation states and everything is so centralized is because of economies of scale, because same reason we have big businesses. But technology is disrupting all that. It's now possible to run things efficiently, to have smooth administration with really good IT systems, and to be able to, that then allows us to give a lot more power to communities. So, and this is rangatiratanga, man. This is what the treaty promised, was that this would be the way that we run our country. So I see an enormous opportunity there to give more power to local communities, to iwi, to hapu, but also to whatever community you want to belong to. If you really identify with your local rugby club, ka pai. If you want that to manage every aspect of your life, that's totally fine. I mean, not every aspect, but I mean giving more power to those local bodies, to be able to, so that people can design the services in a way that suits them. suits their culture, suits
Yeah.
their area, all that sort of stuff. So I think there's
The
big
Inca things.
scope there.
Yeah, no, the Inca thing was interesting, right? So I was reading about the founder of Gore-Tex. He built a thing where every time he'd build a factory that could house 150 people, and then he'd build another one instead of building a bigger one for 300. Because
Yeah,
in his head, he felt that as soon as it got over the number of 150 staff in a building, they would
yeah,
see each other as numbers and not people. And when they
yeah,
saw each other as numbers, not people, they wouldn't have care to do the thing to help the commerce.
yeah.
So there's, I mean, I can understand that. We've got some questions. Chris Merlini says, "What does Geoff think of creating a government business startup fund to help the many Kiwis who will be left unemployed and fearful of being wholly reliant on an employer-employee arrangement in a hugely uncertain economic climate, delivered by private sector incubators or similar entity?" Or banks giving $10,000 free overdraft with zero interest, but whatever. Yep, go for
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I mean, good idea, Chris. I mean, this is exactly why we support a universal basic income, because it allows people to start businesses. It really provides people with that basic level of income so that they can crack on and do that sort of thing. But your idea is another way of doing it. Love it. It's that's exactly the sort of stuff that we need to be encouraging.
Um, it's a. I'm just trying to think who's the heroes in this, because it's clearly not usually the billionaires and the CEOs, right? It's not from the top down. It needs to be from the bottom up, right? Because if there's no
Absolutely.
engagement from the top to the bottom, if they don't have jobs, that they're not going to save them going that way. So who do you think will save the day for this thing commercially and economically for New Zealand? If you fast forward in 2 years, 2022, we're looking at the front page of whatever amalgamated, consolidated, Commerce Commission cleared media company's website we're looking at is the savior. Who do you think it will be?
Oh, look, if I'm in an optimistic mood, I think it will be people shopping local, becoming more local. I think, wouldn't it be fantastic to see, like Chris is suggesting, more little owner-operated businesses setting up, servicing the local community, butchers, greengrocers. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've personally got sick of going to the supermarket during this lockdown period, because that was the only choice that we had. And I'm very much now coming out of that. I'm looking to diversify where I buy things from and find new places to go to get my bread, to get my meat, to get my groceries, all that sort of stuff. So I think that is a major way that we could help each other going forward. And on a much bigger scale, I think how the government buys needs to change as well, because at the moment, when the government procures something, it tends to favour really big businesses. But what if we could have a government procurement office that worked with a whole bunch of small businesses to do what a big business would normally do, for example?
Well, is that social procurement stuff that I've been hearing rumblings about with certain? There's a few bigger fish in town are talking about doing mandatory social procurement percentages for either Māori or Pacific-owned businesses and blah 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 blah, all the rest of it. So you think a bigger nationalised version of that some type?
Yeah, absolutely. And great to focus on Māori and Pacific businesses, local businesses, but what they need is help to work together to deliver what a big business normally does, because that's why government tends to go for big businesses, because it's just easier. It's a one-stop shop. They can get everything that they need. So actually helping those consortium to come together, or if you are going to go with a big organization, mandating that they subcontract a lot of stuff to smaller organizations as well is a good way forward.
I get it. The bro Keith, have you considered a luxury tax rather than annual asset tax?
a luxury tax. I mean,
Well, I
it's
have
a
no idea what that means. What does that mean? You get an extra what, 50 bucks on your Louis V bag, or what's the deal?
yeah. I mean, I assume he's talking about some sort of way of supercharging GST for certain items that are dubbed a luxury. I mean, we'd have to have a pretty big conversation about what's deemed a luxury and what isn't. You know, I'm sure what some people would consider a luxury, others would consider a necessity, and it'd probably take a long time to work through.
Okay, as you say, so purchases over X amount, X being defined by a percentage above the average price in the market. Okay, got it.
Right,
Oh,
okay.
like sports, NFL. There you go. Keith, just start with NFL, and it would have been easier. There you go. Go for it.
Is that how NFL works? If you're,
You
if
get
you're
like you have to pay to luxury taxes on certain players and stuff if you hit over the limits, and it's kind of like a fine for getting like an extra dope player on a big contract.
right. Yeah, I mean, personally, I think the way forward here is some sort of property tax, wealth tax. You know, because we know that the richest New Zealanders, and I'm not talking in terms of income, I'm talking in terms of assets. The richest New Zealanders, about half of them pay about as much tax as your average teacher or nurse. So there are big holes in our tax system, and the way to plug that is around is around some sort of property or asset tax. But who knows? I haven't really considered a luxury asset tax before. I'd have to think more about it.
Got it. If you got into, so has the top party been into Parliament yet or not? Do you send the last one
No.
got to first? So this one will be potentially the one you can get a first seat.
That's right. Yeah. So 2017 was our first election, and this is our second. So yeah.
Now, if you were to get in, how does it work? You'd obviously be number one. You got potentially crew that roll after you, yada yada yada, which I imagine that would happen. Do you let it publicly? Have you let it be publicly known so far who you would potentially partner with? Because I know sometimes these kingmakers with these kind of last little seats and stuff. How does that work? Do you play the lane of what you stand for, and then you negotiate those things after, or do you kind of say, hey, if we got in, we're going to be red or blue? How does that work for where the top party sits right now?
No, we set out what we stand for, which is basically the UBI, bringing down the cost of housing and the environment, and we say that we will bargain for those things with either National or Labor. And I think we've seen from this government the power of being in that kingmaker position, if you like, and being able to bargain with both sides. You know, the Greens said beforehand that they would go with Labor, and they bargained. You know, during the government formation process, they got $100 million green investment fund. Winston, on the other hand, with a similar number of votes as the Greens, got a $3 billion provincial growth fund. So that's 30 times the size of what the Greens got. So it really shows the value of having that bargaining power and being willing to work with either Labor or National.
So you're saying in the whole country, so how many people vote in New Zealand? So how many, there's 5 million people? How many million at the moment?
There's 5 million people in the country. Of course, there's probably a million or just over a million of those that can't vote because they're under 18. And then there's another chunk of people that don't vote, mostly young people, sadly, and this is why our entire society is geared towards older generations, effectively, because younger generations don't bother voting, so politicians can safely ignore them, it's the sad truth. So yeah, of the people that can vote, about 70% of people do vote, but it's mostly the younger generations that don't.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting, right? You say 100,000 people, and I kind of think of it. I'm like, that doesn't feel like it's that, like, you've got flipping these social influencers rolling around with flipping a couple of 100,000, selling all sorts of bad shit for whatever promo codes they're putting through, and then you think about something that could actually change the nation. It's like, oh, you know, I wonder what it would look like if you got a collective of a bunch of these young buck influencers that were young to try and navigate between the 18 to 25 range. Like, there's something in there, man. No one's really cracked that youth thing. I know there's people that get their different lanes, but their relatability part to it, there's something there. Last question before we go is, Kenny says, does Geoff have a view on how his party could develop good quality community housing that is not tarred by stigma of being government funded, but offers good quality housing and a long-term rent commitment, similar to what we see in Europe's socially developed companies? There you go. That seems like it's in your wheelhouse. Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is one of our major parts of our housing policy. New Zealand, like Europe, so Europe, as I think you're saying there, has lots of community housing organisations. So instead of having Housing New Zealand, you have iwi Housing, you have Pacifica Housing, you have different areas that provide housing to their communities. Lots of different ways of dicing that cake. But in New Zealand, we've never actively developed that community housing sector. We haven't done much to really grow it, and that's really what the Opportunities Party wants to do. Instead of putting all of the money into Housing New Zealand, which the current government does, and then instead of selling housing off like National does, we want to grow that community housing sector so that it is, you remove that stigma. You also put the organisation at arm's length from government so that politicians can't fiddle with stuff, because that's always a bad look. And it puts that, again, going back to this localism idea, it puts the power in the hands of the local community. And we know from those European examples that those sorts of community housing organisations, they have people feel prouder to live in those sorts of places because there isn't the stigma, and because they're a community, because they are a community organisation, literally. So huge scope for that sort of approach here in New Zealand, but we just, successive governments really just haven't done anything to grow that community sector.
Amber, last one. Why don't younger generations vote?
I think, Amber, from my conversations with younger people, I think they don't vote because they don't think it makes any difference. And it comes back to that seesaw you were talking about. People don't vote because it's red this time and it's blue this time, and over time it just cancels out, and who cares? And look, I totally agree with that, because that is certainly how it's been for the last 30 years. But things can be different. We've seen with the response to this, this COVID-19 situation, we've seen that government can do radical things. It can achieve extraordinary things if it puts its mind to it. We can bring down the cost of housing if we put our mind to it and make it affordable again. Other countries have done it. We can do it too, but it will require younger generations to vote, because at the moment, older generations have benefited from these really high rents and house prices. They've got no reason to change.
Well, then what happens is the young bucks go to the old bucks and have been paying all those taxes for 20 years for someone else, when if they would have just voted 20 years ago, they could have got more shit for themselves.
Exactly.
So young people are just dumb, mate. You're just dumb. It's just what
no,
you do.
I don't.
They just don't care. They don't think it matters.
And I disagree with that. I don't think they don't care. I just think they look at politics and think this doesn't make any difference to their lives. And I totally understand that, but people need to know it can make a difference. If we do things differently, it can make difference.
I agree. I really appreciate your time, man. This is cool. So if people want to check out more of your stuff with what you're about and how does it work, feel free to do your shameless promo plug for September 19th for the top party. Go for gold.
Kia ora, September 19th, vote, party vote top. And you can check us out at top.org.nz. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. See you there.
It's pretty solid. You finish stronger. You'd be like, top for life, son. Boom. Love your work. Hey, thanks so much for your time, man. It's appreciated. Sorry for some of the dumb questions, but I find I'm 35 and I don't know, and I think I don't know if I'm ashamed that I don't know as much as I do, but I just find it really intriguing how the dynamics of it all works, because you're exactly right. It's not that people don't necessarily care about it, but they just like stuff it. It doesn't really, onto the next. So I think which needs to change. And I put the nice promo pic of you with your pink pants rolled up, drinking. Is that whiskey or beer? Because it looked like it was a bit aggressive to be whiskey. What was that?
It was actually kombucha with whiskey in it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's awesome. Well, next time in Wellies, mate, we'll catch up for a dram. Love your work, mate. Hey, really appreciate your time, dude, and best of luck for all of the rest of it with Top.
Ka kite anō.
Thanks, bro. Peace.
Ciao.
The bro, Geoff Simmons, the leader of the Top Party, the Opportunities Party. Oh, I didn't know if I'd go down the world of flipping politics. I've done it. I've got my first politician on, and we hadn't actually met before, and it's funny because now I kind of feel bad because I know a bunch of these other politicians who have wanted to bro down. So I may open the floodgates and get and start some of this political banter. A few interesting things. Universal basic income, if you haven't heard about it, check into that. The housing stuff, definitely get it. But it's always tough, right? Because you're going to have to trying to look at a 360 view of everything. You're never going to get flipping everyone happy, which is why I stay very, very far away from all of that stuff getting in the mix with it. But I do think it is important because obviously it matters for New Zealand. The ninja move in this is super simple. The ninja move is one of the parties figuring out how to make what carrot can you dangle for every single 18 to 25-year-old that would not usually vote to vote. Every single uni student, what would it need to be? If they could crack that, the numbers might swing crazily. But then the thing is, it can't just be some person they don't relate to. It needs to be someone that they can. I'm not saying it's necessarily look like them, talk like them, act like them. But if you look at the American system with AOC, who's been rolling up, she's getting a lot of hype from youth, and it's because then she's young too. So getting more youth in politics is cool. And we've obviously got some rad weapons. If you have another politician which you would like me to interview on the show, stuff it. Let's do it. I really appreciate all the heads up that and the insights and the comments that came through. Really insightful to see where everyone's headspace at, and appreciate the time. Shot team. See you all soon. Peace.